Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Market PR, the editor of Punchline magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers, where each week I invite a panel of business experts to talk about their businesses, talk about their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. So let me introduce you to the panel, but before I do, I'd just like to thank our fantastic sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors, and great guys they are too. Right, let's introduce the panel. We have Darren Stevens. He's the Managing Director and Principal Consultant of Prestbury Marketing. We have TEGAN McKERNON, Account Executive Leader of Marsh Commercial, Marc Begg, Managing Director of Cirencester Fabrication Services, and Dr. Polly Pick, Director of Business Engagement and Partnership at the University of Gloucestershire. Welcome all to Punchline. Let's quickly review the newspapers before we go through them all individually. So we've got the Times. This is courtesy of the BBC. So the Times. Foreign students face ban from universities. The Eye, student visa crackdown set to spark major cabinet row. The Daily Express, Sula vows to cut net migration by 504,000. The Guardian, MPs urge investigation to PP contracts. The Mirror, first class disgrace. The Daily Telegraph, Johnson and Truss is planning a rebellion. And also the nurses strike there. The Daily Mail, GPs vote to shut doors at just 5 p.m. The Metro, World Sup. Don't get that, but there we go. We move on. And the Daily Star, Bunk Off Friday. The Financial Times, China made security cameras banned use of sensitive Whitehall sites. And the Sun, William quits BGT. That's what the papers all have on today. So Darren, I'm going to start with you this morning. Welcome to Punchline Talks.
Thank you very much.
Picked out for us.
Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to comment that I'm a little bit disappointed you're not wearing your Welsh shirt this morning.
Well, I'm going to get changed after this, actually. I've got my bucket hat on the side there.
I half expected you to rip your shirt off and unveil the Welsh dragon.
I think that's a fantasy of yours, mate.
Yeah. So this morning I've picked out a couple of stories. First one is profits from loft installation boosts Kingfisher. So Kingfisher are behind brands like B&Q and Screwfix. And I think it's a sign of the times, really. What they're saying is that two factors are combining. Firstly, obviously, the spiraling energy prices are forcing us all to think about how we can reduce energy costs. But they actually say the biggest factor is hybrid working. So whereas pre-COVID, people 5 days a week might not be at home and will be enjoying the warmth of the office or the factory or the shop, a lot more people now are spending time working from home and having to heat the house more than they perhaps would do before. And certainly I know, for example, one of my clients is Cleveland. For this time of year, we're seeing unprecedented levels of demand. And whereas, in the past, it might have been a mixture of factors like wanting the house to look better or less maintenance, it's all about energy costs. The other story that caught my eye, and it wasn't in the Eye, by the way, it was in the Telegraph, and it was a guest piece by Kate Andrews, who's the Spectator editor, and it's titled, Early Retirees Will Need to be Tempted Back into Work. And it ties in with the Punchline piece that I'll be looking at later. But there's some eye-watering statistics there. What they're basically saying is that because of COVID, as many as 400,000 people are now not in the workforce because of ill health. But anything between 300,000 and 750,000 are not in work because effectively they've retired early or just said, look, I'm not going to go back to work the way that I did. So what the piece is really saying is if we're going to tempt these people back into work, we're going to have to do things differently, whether that's flexible hours, flexible ways of working. The traditional model just isn't working and tempting these people back in. One final little piece, this one from the Eye, a little piece about Mothercare and how much it was hit by its exit from Russia. And the statistics really shocked me, actually. They did report half-year profits of 400,000, but that's down 3.6 million. And one of the largest factors is the fact they pulled out of Russia, which unbelievably accounted for a quarter of their global sales. So it just shows, the Ukrainian kind of whole war and conflict keeps on affecting industry and commerce in so many different ways.
No, that's right. And it's funny you said about working from home as well, because looking round here and my background, I think we're all working from home at this particular moment. Mark, are you in the office or are you?
No, I'm in the workshop.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
very hard to hit lots of metal and weld metal at home and get it out the door. So, yeah.
It makes me wonder how many people suddenly had a flurry of DIY when you had to work from home, though, and the junk room had to look a bit more professional for.
Absolutely.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I think about those numbers, by the way. I think the bigger thing also is the great inheritance, as they call it. Obviously, a lot of people passed away, and a lot of people inherited money early, and so they've actually got money in their 50s or 60s that they would have had because their parents were still alive, and hopefully, and so they've inherited this money, and actually they don't need to work any longer. So to try and get those guys back into work, I don't think you're going to. You're going to have some massive incentives. Anyway, thanks ever so much for those, Darren. Excellent. Dr. Polly Pick, let's go to you, please. What have you picked out today?
I've got a couple of stories relating to the cost of living. The Guardian had a piece to say that 9 in 10 students in England are worried about the cost of living crisis. It was also picked up by the BBC that half of students in higher education say they're in financial difficulty, with 91% saying they've faced cost increases since last year. And I think that's really worrying. The piece in the Guardian is saying that even quite young children are aware of it and worried about it. And I know most of us on the call will have experienced higher inflation and fuel crises sort of in the 1970s and 80s and things like that. But I think the speed at which this particular crisis has hit and the sort of publicity around it is really worrying for children. And for students, it means that they end up not travelling to sessions. They end up maybe missing lectures because they've got to work, because they need the money. So all of that sort of thing really impacts on their education. And there was an Ipsos poll that said that 10% of students had used a food bank, which I think is horrendous.
Well, that is a lot, isn't it? I mean, the other thing about the students is, I don't know if you agree with me here, is that kids nowadays have never known inflation.
No, they haven't.
A whole generation have never seen prices go up.
And, I've got children that are a bit older than that, and they're thinking about buying houses. And, the idea of 5% mortgage is horrendous. And I'm sure we can all say, well, I remember when it was 17% and all that sort of stuff. But the fact is it's hit really, really quickly, this. It's not sort of ramped up slowly. Kids are hearing their parents talk. Students, if you've had students at university, kids at university, you know that they don't survive on their loan. They need a bit of a handout, and for people now that's potentially really, really difficult. So
the bank and mum and dad is going to be pretty badly hit, isn't it? They're not going to be able to help their kids.
Yeah, so we had graduation yesterday, which was just lovely, but the sort of student experience that those kids have had for the last 3 years has been very different to what they would have expected. And now we're coming out of it, but they're really feeling the pinch. And I think it's that the ramifications of that are going to rumble on for a very long time, I think.
Do you think, Polly, it's going to have a massive effect as we move into next year? And, student numbers themselves are going to start falling as more and more people can't afford to go to university.
Well, I think people are doing slightly different things. So I think more people are studying and living at home rather than going away and having the full student experience. But I do think it's going to be more difficult for them. I mean, for a lot of people, they go to university to learn to live on their own, to learn to budget, to learn to look after themselves. And if they're doing that and really struggling, I mean, most students would say they struggled, but I think to do that and to be having to work I think we need to be a bit more creative about how we recognise the work that they do when they're studying. And I think we need to be mindful of the fact that you know, the way we timetable things and those sort of things, we need to try and accommodate that requirement. Yeah. So that was one thing. That was a bit of a sad story. The other thing I picked up, which Darren might be quite interested in, is Elon Musk in The Independent blaming activists for the fall in his advertising revenue, which I think is quite sweet. And what I've picked up on my sort of Twitter feed is lots of people just complaining about the service, that they can't get hold of anybody, that nobody's responding, that the way their ads are presented, and you know, that the actual product that he's selling has fallen apart because he's sacked half of his people. So you know, it's quite interesting to see what's happening there. Of course, he could have spent, you know, billions on a lot of other things apart from buying something like that and then kind of trashing it. But there we go.
If you imagine all that money, the amount of good he could have done somewhere else, you know, the poor, all these famine around the world, he could have really helped, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, and instead he bought a what do you call it, a flattery project.
Vanity.
Thank you, a vanity product.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you very much. I was going to lead on to Mark with that, saying a vanity product, because he bought a business. He bought a business in lockdown out of love. Mark, thanks ever so much for joining Punchline Talk today. You're a Kiwi, so I'm going to get the Welsh rugby bit over and done with. I saw New Zealand destroy Wales. Then I watched Italy destroy Wales, and then I watched Georgia destroy Wales. So that's all I'm going to talk about it anymore. Okay, so since I've known you, mate, we've lost every single bloody game.
Well, there we go. I won't. We won't predict what the Australia game will be tomorrow. Then.
No, thank you. Please don't. Anyway, let's talk. What have you picked out from the papers, please?
Two bits I've picked out. One is that the number of student suspension has soared after lockdown. So that's a piece covered in the Telegraph. And it's an interesting little bit around the fact that it's at a 6-year high. Now, a 2 or 3 year high, yep, they've obviously the last couple of years, there wouldn't have been that many suspensions. So you can expect it from the last couple of years, but pre-pandemic, the numbers are up, and the papers are quoting that it's down to a lot of disruption in class, just verbal side of it, verbal abusing, and other bits of both teachers and other students. And it seems to be that, you know, what they're trying to imply is that students have forgotten how to behave in large groups of people in a proper, formal way. So it's quite interesting to see how that's gone. And I guess, I don't know, Polly, if you've noticed that at the university is hopefully slightly different with the older kids, but definitely the younger kids seem to be struggling in social environments to behave in the right way. And then the other one I've picked out is around net migration, and it picks up a little bit on Darren said earlier on around skilled workers and getting older workers back to work. And it's in the Mail, and it's actually covered in a lot of different papers just around the size of the net migration. But the underlying bit in it actually is, if you read a little bit deeper into it, we still have 1.2 million open job vacancies in this country that we can't fill. And a large percentage of that is around skilled workers. And I see it within my sector, and I see it across the community. I'm now part of the chamber down here in Cirencester. And one thing that we've seen from our members is they're all saying that there is a massive skills shortage in trades. So whether that be the engineering, whether it be carpentry, plumbing, electricians, and there is a net gap forming and expanding. So over the next 5 to 10 years, we will have a major shortage of skilled tradespeople in this country. We already do, unless we do something about it. And it goes back to the word apprenticeships and getting kids excited about actually going and doing some skilled labour and some skilled trades. And it's something that I'm passionate about and definitely pushing, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But just interesting, the net migration, the way that it is, and yet we still have a massive deficit in the number of open job roles within the country.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Mark. Let's go to you, Tegan. Tegan, thanks ever so much for joining Punchline Talks. Welcome for the first time.
Thank you.
What have you picked out for us, please?
So the first thing that caught my eye was Tesco's are doing tubs of Quality Street for £3.50. That was the most exciting news story. A bit more jolly than the rest of the news. And then what Mark was talking about there with the skills shortage and the net migration is on the front page of a lot of the papers. And the Financial Times has picked up on the fact that colleges basically need a lot more funding to maintain the basic services they provide. And without that funding, they're not going to be able to train skilled workers. The other headline seems to be that we're not going to allow migration of skilled workers in. So we're going to lose out both ways. The article basically says the government's going to give 2.3 billion extra spend to schools. None of it's going to the higher education sector. So they're just perpetuating the problem, it would seem, on the surface of it.
It seems bonkers, doesn't it? There seems to be a lack of quality teachers to actually teach the students as well. They're not going. I mean, Polly can help us with this. Polly as well. If you can't find a plumber to teach kids or a construction worker to teach them, where do you get all that expertise?
Is that because the plumbers and the construction workers get more going to do the job than getting paid into teaching the colleges? Maybe.
Yeah, that's probably a big part of it, actually. Yeah.
Especially if there's a shortage of them, they can command more, right? From
Well, who knew a welder could earn £100,000 or a brickie can earn? I think
don't tell my people that they can earn that, Mark.
And the recruitment issue, I think, is not just in the sort of skilled workers like those trades. We're seeing there's a shortage of recruitment people. There's a shortage of insurance brokers. All the networking things I go to, people are trying to find staff, asking each other if they can recommend anyone. It started with hospitality, and it seems to have just spread everywhere.
It's every single sector that I talk to, and I talk to everybody, and it really is right across the board. It's quite frightening, actually, and it's going to hold back the whole economy. And I don't understand the government. You've got these people who want to come in this country, and it seems an ideological thing, isn't it, about Brexit? Oh no, we don't want migration. We don't want to accept these people. Yet 500,000 people have come in anyway.
One of the headlines focuses on students not being allowed. And when I was at university, the international students pretty much could only come, I think, if they had a certain amount of money in the bank.
Yeah.
So I struggle to see why the paper's focusing on that as a problem.
I just don't get it. And it's the hospitality trade. It's, they just can't afford to keep going, and let alone the cost of fuel and everything. Well, thanks ever so much for that, Tegan. We'll move on to our own individual business sectors now. So I'm going to go start off with you, Darren. Obviously, you're working in marketing, been going for quite some time. As we, let's be honest, it looks like we're going to be heading for a recession. I don't like to use the word recession. And the first thing businesses do, is they start to think, right, put my metal helmet on, I'm going to stop marketing. They get rid of their sales guys, they get rid of their marketing budget. To me, it sounds crazy. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree definitely with the last recession. That was a factor. But it seems to me as though the realization, and there's been so many articles that have shown that how those businesses that continued marketing came out of the last recession better. I'm actually finding it less so than previous recessions. What I do find is the nature of the kind of inquiries I get change a little bit. So I'm getting more businesses wanting me to review what they're currently doing to find efficiencies or to get more out of the same spend. I'm also seeing some people doing reviews of resources. So, we've got X number of marketing people. Is that the right number of people? Are they doing the right things? But on the flip side as well, we're also getting inquiries about investment. So I can't say the name, unfortunately, but I've got a meeting this morning with a national retail chain that is planning to open a new kind of outlet in Cheltenham. So the investment is still going on.
Oh, that's fantastic. And is there a particular area at all that you're seeing growth? You know, are people still getting their brochures designed? Are they still getting, you know, doing the traditional marketing?
The vast majority is digital. And that won't surprise you at all. You know, you look at the growth of what you've done with Punchline digitally, you know, it's a fantastic product. So I would say 80% of the inquiries I get have digital running through it in one way or the other, whether that's social media, email marketing, websites. You still get a bit of the traditional stuff, and you know, some people are thinking about rebranding, some people are thinking about entering new markets, but the vast majority digital.
Okay, right. Thanks ever so much for that, Darren. Polly, go over to you. The university and apprenticeships are the forefront of the conversation earlier. What's going on in the universities world?
So our apprenticeship program has just grown rapidly over the last 5 years. So we started when I moved down in about 5 years ago. We had about 35, and we'll go over 1,000 this year. So it's grown enormously, particularly we do a lot of nursing and health apprenticeships, but also in management and leadership. And what we're looking at, what we're seeing, it's interesting hearing everybody else talking about skills and staff shortages, is that there's a real incentive to putting people on an apprenticeship. So in our senior leader program, people come out with an MBA. We do degree level management and leadership. And if you've got people in your organisation who are maybe being a bit held back because they don't have a degree, or they've, you know, perhaps they've always felt that, to go on a programme, if you pay the levy, that money's already spent. And for small businesses who don't pay the levy, you'd only pay 5% of the cost. So people could get an MBA, say, for £700 if they had to pay for it, as opposed to the full cost, which is like 14,000. So, and that's incentivizing people. It's helping to retain people in an organisation. And I think the other thing really is apprenticeships have been criticised by some ministers, excuse me, because we have this typical view that apprenticeships are all about young people and all about school leavers, and that side of things hasn't grown as rapidly as they wanted it to. Principally, I would suggest because they don't put enough money into FE and further education colleges. But the other thing is, you know, we're all living longer. We've all got to work a lot longer till we get to our pensions. And the days where you went into a job at 16, 18, and you stayed doing that for, you know, until you retired, those have gone. People need to reskill and retrain and get ready for new challenges and new industries. And that's what apprenticeships can do by sort of changing the focus of what people do. So things like engineering and manufacturing, and all those sort of things, people need to retrain, and apprenticeships are a really good way of doing that. So I think they're a really important part of the jigsaw puzzle, but we do have this kind of mindset that they're for young people. Our oldest apprentice is 59 at university. So, you know, and I think the oldest one nationally is 70 plus.
I'd just like to say 59 is a pretty young pup, really. There's not enough to that at all. And that's a nice way to finish, and come over to Tegan. Actually, Tegan, I'm going to go to you next. Actually, thanks ever so much for that, Polly. As we move into, as things get a bit tighter, are people reviewing their insurance?
So you do start to see people try and cut their sums insured back a bit because the premiums are linked to the sum insured. Our job really as an insurance broker is to make sure that they're adequately protected, and that means that they give the true value of their assets to the insurer at the outset of the policy. It's false economy really to reduce those sums insured, because if you have a claim, a loss adjuster will come in, he'll assess she'll assess how adequate your sum insured was on day one of your policy, and if it's found to be lacking, then they won't pay out the full settlement of the claim to you. So if you have £1 million fire and you were underinsured by 50%, you're only going to get £500,000 paid out, and the insured is left to foot the rest of the bill. if they've got very deep pockets, maybe that doesn't bother them too much. But there's a lot of businesses where that will put them completely out of business. That's been an age-old problem, but now we've got rates of inflation as they are. The value of rebuilding or the time it's going to take to get new machinery in is just increasing all the time. And these businesses are going to find that they're increasingly underinsured and have a bigger problem should a loss occur. So we're working with a lot of clients now to get them like desktop rebuilding assessments to make sure that their sums insured are adequate for their building. We'll do a review on their business interruption cover. So if they are only covered for 12 months, you might now be saying, but that machine you need from Italy needs a chip from China. It's going to take you 2 years to get that. You need to extend the indemnity period to make sure that your loss of income is covered long enough that you can restart your business and get back up to trading levels. You know, if you don't have that cover in place, you're fundamentally not going to be able to restart.
And have you seen a lot of other companies, you know, moving from home and closing down their office work and then changing their policies? Is there a different policy to work from home? Is that should be?
So a lot of insurers changed their wording, and so automatically then started to include cover for staff taking like computer equipment off-site and things like that. So it sort of they sort of did that work for us, which was really helpful at the time while we were fielding a lot of queries about business interruption because, you know, businesses couldn't open. The other thing I've seen is, although I predominantly cover the Gloucestershire area, I've now got clients that might be like one of them, the head office is in Glasgow and their distribution hub is in Liverpool. But when I started trading with them, they couldn't see any brokers. No one could visit them. So they didn't mind that I was, you know, in the southwest as opposed to on their doorstep. And then you've got other clients now who have started to like live wherever they want. So, you know, the MD of a company or CEO might now live in the Philippines or travel between, I don't know, Dubai and London all the time. And that means they don't really mind where their broker is because the majority of things is done over Zoom anyway.
So is it more like the company's reputation or that personal interaction, you know, personal relationships that you've got?
Yeah, I think it's about the service. So if you're very readily available to your client, that helps them. You know, when they have a question, they want the answer as quick as possible. And, you know, the cut down probably on the time that we spend driving around now or driving to client sites means that we are more readily available.
Yeah. How many people work at Marsh Commercial? Sorry.
At Marsh. So we've got about I think we've got 2,000 people in the UK. It's global though. It's part of the biggest insurance broker in the world. So we're owned by Marsh McKernon over in the States. It used to be smaller brokers. You had Jalf, Clark Roxburgh, Bluefin. They've all been bought by Marsh over time. So that's made us a massive presence nationally here and across the world.
And how many guys have you got here in Gloucestershire?
So we work kind of remotely now. So as I said, it doesn't matter where you are. So we've got multiple people around Gloucester, Cheltenham, and then we report into the Bristol or the Worcester hub offices. So you go in a couple of days a week, see your team, you know, sort of get that energy boost and get a load of sort of admin tasks done and then go and see the clients the rest of the time from home.
And I see you're a prolific networker as well. You seem to be popping up everywhere. People who...
So I'm beating the cost of living crisis by eating out all the time. At networking events. It's not coming out of my pocket.
sounds like a cunning plan to me. Thanks ever so much for that. Great to see you today, Mark. Let's go over to you, please, mate. Nice to see you. Now we met the first time actually over lockdown because you bought your factory, didn't you, in Cirencester?
I did just over 2 years ago now. So
wow,
2 years and a month, pretty much to the day.
I'm gonna go to your website here. So just give an overview, please, of the business.
Yeah, so we make things out of steel is the most basic way to put it, and we do everything from construction work. So we do a lot of steel work for people that are doing extensions to their house. We'll do the steels and stuff for it. We do a lot of staircases, both commercial and also residential. We do a nice range in spiral staircases, which is a great side. And we also go slightly more high end, so we make bespoke things for clients. The latest of which, you know, we've just made a built-in gun safe behind a nice bookshelf and everything else. So there's a variety of different things. What you're seeing there is what we'll classify as street furniture. So benches, bike racks, shelters, those sort of things as well. So there's a real wide variety of things we actually do and can fabricate.
And who tends to be your clients?
So we have a mixture. We have some that are what we'll call sort of wholesale clients. So they'll have the actual end customer in mind. So we do a lot of stuff into universities and colleges and others. So their bike racks and shelters and other bits. We don't sell those directly. We sell them in through third parties. A lot of the local builders will come to us. And as you know, around this sort of area within the Cotswold, there's a lot of very select clients, of which names you can't mention or anything else. But we do a lot of these bespoke things into their houses that you'd never see or hear of.
Now you bought the business. I remember you saying that you looked to buy the company, and when we first met, so has it lived up to expectations? You know, I mean, it was a huge gamble, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a huge gamble. It was what I knew. It was what I trained in. We've all been talking about apprenticeships. I did a sheet metal apprenticeship many years ago. So I know what good looks like, and the quality that the output of the company was second to none. So I knew that the skilled workers were there in place. It was more around how to market it and how to actually sell the company. So the old owners weren't really too interested in going and generating new business, that much marketing or anything else. And with some very basic things, even an update of the website and some other bits. This year, I mean, we're on a trajectory at the moment to have increased revenue by near on 40% year on year for this particular year, which, given the circumstances, is a fantastic feat. We have problems. We have problems in that the price of steel is still up. It's not quite at the all-time high it was back in sort of March timeframe, but it's still way up. So revenues might be up, but the squeeze of the fuel crisis and steel prices and everything else mean margins are very low. But that's around managing a business and making sure that you do the right things. And my bit off your site a bit later on is around the amount of small firms that are on the brink of collapse at the moment, and it takes an awful lot to be able to manage it. So to answer the original question, has it lived up to expectations? Well, and then some. Is a lot to be done. I was always told the two best days of your life from a business point of view are the day you buy it and the day you sell it, and in between everything's just worry and fear. So there's a lot of that, but I'm happy to say our order book is looking fairly healthy at the moment, and the prospects are looking fairly good despite the economy. So all in all, I'm positive about the experience still after 2 and a bit years.
Oh, congratulations, Mark. I know you've done a tremendous job there. And when I popped down when I was delivering the magazines, it was just great to see all the, the guys who are working there. It was real hands-on, big bits of steel and, guys welding. I love all that kind of stuff. Anyway, thanks ever so much for that. Darren, I'm going to go back over to you. We're kind of running out of time, guys. It goes so quickly. So we're going to quickly wrap up with what's caught your eye in this week's punchline. So Darren, starting with you, what's caught your eye in this week's punch, please?
So yeah, very apt story, I think, given everything that we've all been talking about, skill shortages, apprentices, etc., etc. I love the story that you ran about over 50s to be offered apprenticeships by Halfords. Basically, they need to recruit 1,000 new automotive technicians over the next 12 months. 2 reasons for that. They've launched their own kind of loyalty club, which is proving very successful at tying customers in. But the other reason is because of the economic situation, people are holding on to their cars for longer. So apparently the average length of time that somebody's holding onto their car is now 8.7 years, which is a year more than normal, which of course then leads to more repairs. The funniest bit, though, I did think was that, do you know what they've called the scheme where they're getting these over 50s back? It's called a retirement plan with a Y, which I thought was excellent.
Well,
excellent.
Thanks very so much for that. Polly, what have you picked out in this week's plan?
Excuse me. So I picked out your piece about Tyler Grange. They're an environmental consultancy. I think they're also down in Cirencester as well. And they've achieved the status of being a B Corp. We've got a few companies like that around us, the Beeswax Wraps and one or two others. So it's kind of a burgeoning thing in Gloucestershire, which I'm hugely proud of. It's an enormously high standard that they have to hit to become a B Corp, but basically it means it's an organisation that balances the need to make a profit and grow the business with aims and targets around people and planet as well. And it is really strenuous. So fair play to them. That's a real coup.
No, it's fantastic. I was talking to Greg Pilley, you know, the guy from Stroud Brewery. He's B Corp as well. I suppose it's different types of businesses. It must be easier for some businesses than others, you know, that actually manufacture. I mean, for Mark, making manufacturing steel and things like that, you know, it must be more difficult to get a B Corp than other companies, if you know what I mean. Anyway, let's go quickly over to Tegan. Tegan, what have you picked out from this week's Punch, please?
So it's carrying on the theme really of skills and apprenticeships and education. There was an event yesterday that you touched on, and I believe you're going to do a big piece on later today, in the Forest of Dean yesterday, to inspire sort of older children, I guess, to have a more open mind about the jobs they can go into, and especially in the area. So living in Drybrook, this was of interest to me. When I was at school, careers advice was pretty weak. I think, you know, it was the PE teacher did it in a free session or something, and you just had like standard, you could be a teacher, you could be a doctor, you could be a, you know, those kind of typical professions. So it's focused more on what businesses are around here, getting the children to engage with them and understand more about the jobs you don't really ever hear about until you're in the workplace, and then it's sometimes too late to decide if you wanted to do them or not. No,
and it was a fantastic event, and they had some really big hitters from the business community there as well. And I just want to say congratulations to the people who organised it. It was absolutely amazing. Mark, what's caught your eye in this week's Punchline, please?
Already mentioned it slightly. It's the fact that you know, I don't think anyone's surprised, but small businesses are on the brink of collapse. 1 in 4 is on the brink of collapse. It's a little bit of doom and gloom. Sorry to finish sort of your session on that, but it's tough for businesses out there at the moment with everything and the uncertainty, and then inflation hitting like it is just increasing everything. You know, I had put a bit of a pledge to my guys to try and keep up with inflation and cost of living and everything. And it's going to be hard to be able to fulfill that. No one predicted it would get into double digits or anything else like that. So it's tough for all businesses out there at the moment, especially small, especially retail, hospitality. Some of these ones are very hard hit. Everyone's still building things at the moment, so we're lucky, but I can see how it's hitting others.
It's funny you say about, you know, don't want to finish with a bad news story, Mark, but unfortunately the news is sometimes bad, and it is reality of running your own business. And, you know, we have to cover those kind of things. And sometimes we get all the news reports together and I look at it and go, goodness, guys, can we find some decent stories, please? Not decent, but can we find some good news stories? Anyway, thanks ever so much for my panel today. Really, really great show. I'd just like to thank our sponsors as well, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors. And if you like the show, please like, share and subscribe, and we'll be back again next week. Thanks ever so much for your time. Cheers, bye.